Spike Lee has said he wants to call his new film project Chiraq, which is a name coined by Chicago rappers, drawing a comparison between the street violence of Chicago and the violence of Iraq.
There are very good people that live in Englewood. The gun violence is not limited to Chicago. It's happening in Philadelphia, Baltimore, New York, where he's from.
A lot of people have opinions about the so-called title of the film. Again, know nothing about the film.
There you go, a compilation of media coverage from the Chicago Tribune and elsewhere about this new Spike Lee film called Chiraq. And that's where we're going to start our roundtable today. And please welcome in co-host of the Daily Wrap and senior political contributor at Forbes.com, Rick Ungar, and health policy expert and former Lieutenant Governor of New York, Betsy McCaughey. It's good to have you both with us here today.
Thanks, you.
Man. All right, so Spike Lee taking some heat from the mayor of Chicago and elsewhere. Folks say they're concerned about the film's title. Rahm says it gives legitimacy to an exaggerated term used by Chicago rappers. Rick, what do you think?
Well, I mean, for one thing, we don't know that that's going to be the final title from what I'm led to understand. It's a working title. It is a bit incendiary, but then when you're trying to sell a movie, that's kind of what you do, isn't it?
Yeah, well, though some have credited him for raising awareness and talking about, you know, although not the same thing, but this is a real war going on in the streets of Chicago.
Right. Chicago's known for it.
Betsy,
right.
I like the fact that it's an incendiary title. There's been so much discussion recently focused on the purported misdeeds of police against perpetrators, when in fact there should be a lot more focus on the victims of urban violence in places like Chicago, where many, many people, almost all of them minorities, are shot because of the violence in the neighborhoods. And this title underscores that. It's a war zone.
It absolutely is, and it's one of the saddest stories in our country right now, and hats off to Spike Lee for raising awareness to this issue.
Right, let's switch gears now to Obamacare. The Senate probing Obamacare tax credit problems. Many taxpayers were forced to owe the IRS some of the tax credit money they received in exchange for buying health insurance. Senator Rob Portman now leads that investigation. He believes the government could lose more than $150 billion over 10 years. Betsy.
Well, first of all, this is an example of the total incompetence of this administration. Whether you supported the idea of Obamacare or not, the fact is it hasn't been executed well at all. Think about it. 96% of the subsidies handed out in the past year were incorrect. Some were too big, some were too small. Only 4% of taxpayers who got Obamacare got the subsidy right. So half of them owe money and the other half are owed money. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
And Rick, at the same time, though,
on 96% of the time.
Rick, I want to get your thoughts on this, though.
Look, I mean, actually, I agree with one thing Betsy said. It is an execution problem. I think that's important to note. I did a little looking into these investigators who were hired. And by the way, let me say at the outset, if anybody's going to criticize, Portman is the right guy. I consider him a very realistic, sensible guy. So you probably picked the right Republican to look into this. But, you know, from everything I can find out, the investigators who did try and set this thing up, they ended up never getting a government benefit. So I'm not sure this is the best place to draw the argument.
That's
that
actually
said,
not true. I read the report, and they were able to get the benefits, and in fact, several months in a row, they got their insurance paid for, even though
we can argue about it because what I read was the opposite. But let me get to a part you'll like better, Betsy.
Let's Rick finish, and then we'll get your comments, Betsy.
Look, you know, there are execution problems. I went back and I've done it a few times, taken a look at the difficulties when the United States was setting up Social Security, Medicare. You always have growing pains when you try and mount something like this. That said, I would have to agree with Betsy. We've seen some of the difficulties that have come with the execution with Obamacare. It hasn't been pretty, but there's still going to be difficulties as you get this thing rolling, even in the best of circumstances. Not letting them off the hook, though. There are mistakes being made.
Betsy, we're running out of time right now in this segment, but your final thoughts.
If you can't execute, you can't govern.
That's a fair point. Now, the Still, this budgetary process is going on. Talk of what's going to happen with these subsidies moving ahead. We're about to take a short commercial break, but Betsy, do you think that ultimately the Republican Party will push to eliminate Obamacare during this budgetary process with about 20 seconds to go? Do you think they're going to make that a real...
It depends on what the Supreme Court does in the coming weeks in King versus Burwell.
All right, so it's a wait and see, guys. We're going to check back in with you here in just a few moments. We'll continue with our roundtable discussion right after this short commercial break. After this, we're also
we've got you all pumped up and ready to go.
Yeah, and we're going to have Rick stick around with us, too. Rick's going to play real or fake with us, see if he can pass the test like his buddy Larry Elder did last week. We'll take a look at some stories this week.
No pressure.
That, again, prove that truth is often stranger than fiction, right?
Oh, yeah, you're not kidding. Wait until you see these headlines.
And we welcome you back to our roundtable discussion. Miranda and I are joined again by co-host of the Daily Wrap and senior political contributor at Forbes.com, Rick Ungar. And there on the left side of your screen, health policy expert and former Lieutenant Governor of New York, Betsy McCaughey. Guys, wanted to really change things up a little bit and call your attention to a little gem we found yesterday on the internet. Play clip. Oh, you can't turn away. That is not Lionel Richie and the crew from the 80s singing. Those are members of NATO singing that Wednesday night in Turkey, singing "We Are the World." Secretary of State John Kerry. I'm getting choked up here. I wasn't there, though, surprisingly. And neither was Martin O'Malley and his guitar there. But this comes at the same time, in all seriousness, when we have Ash Carter, our defense secretary, telling the European members of NATO it's time to step up to the plate. What kind of message does this really send, considering we have these serious conflicts going on around the world, Betsy?
Well, when I saw that video, I thought to myself, if only you were the world. Unfortunately, you're receding from the world. NATO is becoming less and less powerful, less and less committed to supporting freedom against aggressors like Putin. And so it was kind of a sad thing. They're substituting song for action.
Yeah, Rick, and we're hearing, too, many of these European countries now, their military budgets, their contributions to NATO and other joint operations, less than 2% of their income. Again, Ash Carter's asking our European allies to step up to the plate. Do you think they will ever do so, or are we going to have to do it alone?
Well,
wait, let's make a...
That was for Rick.
See in the recent conflicts over the Ukraine,
Betsy, hold on one second. That question was for Rick. We'll get your response.
Pardon me?
Go ahead, Rick. That question was for Rick. We'll get your response. I'm sorry.
There's a critical distinction we should probably make. Guys, it was after work. They probably had a few drinks and they were having some fun together.
No.
Lighten up. Do you guys actually think that we're...
No.
What?
I'm just playing. I'm playing with you, Rick. Go ahead.
Oh, I mean, come on. You know, sometimes we all get a little carried away, I think, with what we do. I don't know about you, but you know what? When I'm done with this stuff, I've been known to do something like that myself.
Right? Yes. Are you a pretty good singer?
We gotta lighten up. I'm actually a pretty good singer and an even better guitar player.
It's one thing though, Rick, and I agree with you to a certain extent, but it's one thing to go to a karaoke bar and have some pops with your friends and get a little loose and get on the microphone, but when you're at a conference of this sort, which is a quasi-governmental
and it's
situation,
after hours.
Still, the purpose of the event is a NATO conference. I can see where you're coming from.
Rick. I'm kind of with you, Rick. What?
All right,
John.
I guess I'm the big killjoy, huh?
You are.
I'm the only one concerned about
these are
Betsy, you and I can go have a glass of wine and
dance with Rick than dance with those guys over at NATO.
Yes, we all would rather dance with Nick than those guys with Rick than those guys over at NATO.
Do you play an instrument? No, I'm just kidding. But I do. I kind of with Rick here. I mean, this was obviously not part of the actual conference. No. This was afterwards. It's good bonding.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
That's exactly the words that were in my head.
We're gonna go sing after work today.
I mean, I would be okay with seeing something like this if it felt like there was any progress being made in the conflicts that Betsy just talked about. You have Vladimir Putin thumbing his nose at all of Europe. Meantime, Europe, and going back to that comment, Rick, a while back from Victoria Nuland saying Europe needs to step up to the plate, and yet they don't do so.
But I don't think Betsy's saying that the NATO is less effective because they're spending their time singing.
No, that's not what I said. Listen to the song they were singing. We are the world.
Right.
They're not the world.
So what can they do differently other than change songs?
You know, I don't know how to tell you this, but you know what? All those people in that recording studio all those years ago, they're not really the world either.
This is true.
That is true.
This is true. It's fun, though, to go back and watch.
Lighten up, guys. Come on.
I am. I'm relaxing. I'm going to...
All right, I'm gonna unbutton the top button here, Rick, and take your advice. And
Ooh.
lighten up a
Good
little
plan,
bit.
my friend. Good plan. It's Friday.
It's Friday, after all. All right, Rick Ungar, Betsy McCaughey, thanks so much for being with us. And Rick,
stick around because we really are going to lighten things up a little bit. We're going to talk about some stories, headlines that may be real, may be fake. It happens all the time, right? You see these stories, they circulate. It's like that whole... You played that game as a kid. Surely you played some games as a kid. The telephone game. You remember that?
Yeah, but everything always got changed when you played the telephone game, right? That was the point of it. You see
okay, sorry. More like the rumor mill.
Yes, we're going to start the rumor mill, crank it up, as we mentioned, though. And I'm going to try to loosen up a little bit. I'm going to make that my goal for the rest of Friday. I guess I'm the square here, concerned about our safety and security in our relationship with NATO.
I agree with some of your comments and what you were saying, and I agree with what Betsy was saying. However, it was after the conference. You could tell it was after the conference.
It is about the message you project.
It was 5 o'clock somewhere, and it was 5 o'clock there, clearly.
Okay,
that's all I'm going to say.
We know they have different rules over there in Europe when it comes to that type of stuff.
So coming up next, some headlines. Are they real or fake? We put Rick Ungar to the test. Stay tuned.